Hello and welcome. This is Wrestling Express. I'm here with another interview, and for this one, I'm with the senior official for Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and a face that you might be familiar with if you've seen Lucha Underground on the El Rey Network. It's Rick Knox. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Glad to be here. Look forward to it.
That's great to hear. How I normally start up interviews is basically giving the interviewee the ball by asking him to maybe shed background on how he got into the business and, give information about himself that maybe not, to make him more recognizable for fans that may not know him.
Sure. Well, I kind of, early memories of wrestling go back to some of my earliest memories of life, actually. It's kind of funny, when you think back as being a baby or whatever, and something like that stuff your earliest memories that you can actually kind of think of. One of my earliest vivid memories was seeing an incident happen on television, which was a wrestling angle at the local territory at the time. Bill LaBelle owned NWA territory out here in Los Angeles. And the incident that happened was a heel named John Tolis grabbed a bag of powder out of a doctor's bag. It was called Monzel's powder, and threw it in the eyes of Freddie Blassie and blinded him. It was such a realistic and intense angle. I mean, this was 1971. I was only about 3 years old. That's why it's just an early memory in life. And I remember it not so much because of the incident, which I remember seeing the white powder and all that flying through the sky, but I remember just the reaction and the way my family talked about it for like weeks afterwards. I mean, it was a big deal. It was wrestling was a little different back then. It was a little more mainstream. A lot more attention was on it, and there wasn't probably a household in Southern California that wasn't talking about John Tolis blinding Freddie Blassie. I mean, it was that big of a deal. And so wrestling was always kind of there as I was a child growing up in my household, my grandparents' household. I didn't really kind of get into it as a big fan until several years later when I was in my early teens, I guess. I started watching WWF shows on TV Saturday mornings with my dad. This would probably be around 1982, 1983, so they were just kind of expanding nationwide. So the wrestling my dad used to watch was now suddenly WWF wrestling, and that's what I would watch with him on Saturday mornings, and I'd stay the weekend with him because my parents were divorced at the time. Started watching that pretty much every weekend, and then it got to where, even when I wasn't with my dad, I was still watching wrestling. Started buying the magazines, getting into it, trying to read as much about it as you could, searching for it, looking through the TV guide page by page to look for anything that said wrestling was going to be on, no matter what time of night or what channel, to see if I could possibly get it and to find out what it was. Those early years I was watching WWF, then I stumbled onto World Class out of Texas, and eventually got to see Mid-South out of Louisiana, and it just started growing. AWA out of Minneapolis. I mean, I started just really searching it out and watching every little bit of wrestling I could. And not long after that, wrestling kind of boomed again, with all the celebrity angles and the 80 WrestleMania period, Mr. T and everything. I was there to witness all that stuff as a youngster. Went to pretty much all the WWF house shows out here. They were the only company that would kind of tour out here. Went to all the shows I could. Started going to all the independent California shows that I could. Pretty much, that's how I spent the 1980s, going to high school and going to punk rock shows and going to wrestling shows and watching it on the weekends. And didn't really get into the whole referee thing until the mid-90s when I actually kind of just stopped wrestling, believe it or not. We were talking about hockey before the interview, and I kind of started really focusing on watching hockey, getting into that, playing that. But then one day I read in the newspaper an article about a local independent wrestling promotion running not far from my house called the Empire Wrestling Federation, and they had an actual wrestling school, the School of Hard Knocks, run by two guys who used to do jobs for WWF and were independent stars, and they were Billy Anderson and Jesse Hernandez, and they had partnered up together. We're running the School of Hard Knocks, and we're cranking out some good students at the time. There wasn't too many wrestling schools at the time. So to find out that this was going on in my backyard practically was pretty enlightening, and so I started going to their shows and really kind of fell in love with wrestling again with what I was seeing, just the heart and passion of these youngsters. The guys I was seeing at the time were guys like Christopher Daniels, Rico Costantino, Louis Spiccoli. These were guys who were the local stars, and this is probably 1996 or so, and really got my attention. So started going to the school, Hard Knocks, to check it out and see, hey, this is my chance. A little past my prime, but here's my chance now. And once I got into the school and started watching these guys train and do what they do, and seeing how the bumps they take up close, pretty much came to the realization no way in hell I was going to be able to do that or could handle doing that. It was very much an eye opener as far as the physicality of what pro wrestling was all about. But I didn't lose any interest in it. I still wanted to be involved. So I mean, I was taking pictures for him. I was making programs for him. I was making flyers. I was helping, stuff like that. Anything that pretty much didn't involve getting into the ring. And during some of the practices that they would do after their school sessions, they would do practice matches, and they'd need a referee. So I said, hey, let me give that a shot. Got in the ring and started refereeing, and pretty soon the guys started saying that I was good enough to be booked on the shows, and they looked to Bill and Jesse and said, get this guy booked on some shows. He's a better ref than most of the guys that we're using. And so started actually working the shows that way, and pretty much never turned back. Unfortunately, after a couple of years, Bill and Jesse split up and went their separate ways. Jesse still runs the School of Hard Knocks and the Empire Wrestling Federation. Bill Anderson opened up the Bill Anderson School of Wrestling and ran the International Wrestling Council. And, basically they kind of went their own ways, but I kind of kept going with it and never really looked back. Started working for another promotion out there called UPW, Ultimate Pro Wrestling, owned by Rick Bassman, which was at the time a kind of a feeder developmental group for the WWF or WWE. And so we got some good exposure working with some big names through that company. For the first time, I got big show experience with big production values and big audiences, and that's what UPW was kind of all about, to get guys ready for WWE. So it was pretty cool and exciting. And pretty much just started working for every wrestling promotion that I could in Southern California, and worked as many different styles as I could, and try to work as much lucha libre as I could, because there was so much of it out here. And that's pretty much how I got started, and why I became a referee and not a wrestler.
Cool. That was a very good story. So, since you took us up to the late 1990s, I would say, how about now we jump a little further to 2001, and maybe you can, since you were already on the indies, am I right, in 2001?
Oh, yeah.
Why not shed some light on how the bankruptcy of WCW and ECW affected the indies in the spring of 2001?
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. Wrestling, when I first got involved, it was kind of funny. When I was a big fan in my teen years, when I was watching wrestling and doing the backyard brawling and all that crazy stuff, whole nother story. There was basically the big three. You had the WWF, you had the NWA, you had the AWA. You looked at the wrestling magazines, those were basically the three categories. And of course you had all, lots of great wrestling promotions, but most of those would fall under the NWA banner. But that's pretty much what it was, the three big companies. You had three world champions, and that's, what it was. By the time I got involved, it was a little bit different. You basically had a big two, and then a distant third. Big two, of course, being WWF/WWE and WCW. And then The distant third would be ECW. ECW, very much admittedly so, is what helped rekindle, I think, the boom of wrestling in the mid-90s. ECW, by the time I got a glimpse of what ECW was doing in the 90s, I was like, man, this is what I wish wrestling was doing in the 80s. This is what I was wanting it to be like when I was a fan. Now that I'm older and I'm watching it, it's like it kind of lost a lot of its luster for me. I still appreciated it, and I still enjoyed watching the ECW shows, but I noticed that a lot of the guys who were coming up and training at the time were kind of modeling themselves after the ECW model, so to speak, if that kind of makes sense. So they had that underground feel, so a lot of the wrestlers could almost see that almost as a shortcut. You know, you had to be a certain level of expertise and a certain level of professionalism to be in WWE or WCW. ECW had guys with t-shirts and jeans. It was a little more easy to represent that image, which is why I think there was a boom in the hardcore look. Not even so much guys who necessarily wrestled the hardcore style, but just had the look, the jeans and t-shirt look. You know, lack of training, lack of funds, lack of whatever. It was easy to do, and you could dress like that and say, hey, I'm a wrestler. Look, that's what the guys on TV look like. But I'm totally getting sidetracked. But basically what happened after WCW kind of went bankrupt is those options were gone now. It was like you had WWE, and that was kind of it. There was no more real WCW. There was no more real ECW. There was nothing else to really aspire to. You saw a lot of guys on my end being at UPW, which at the time I mentioned, you know, was closely affiliated with WWF. You started to see a lot of the WCW guys come to work our shows, being directed to come work to us by WWE because they needed more seasoning in that WWE style, which is what UPW was trying to groom and teach at the time. So we had guys like Palumbo and Sean O'Hare, you know, coming and working with us now, and to kind of try to groom them to learn the WWE style. The guys that they felt weren't necessarily going to go right to TV are guys who just could use little tweaking, or guys that just wanted to keep busy while they didn't have anything for them on TV would come and work UPW shows. So you saw somewhat of a saturation of WCW talent suddenly big working indie shows, which you didn't see before. But it was a discouraging thing as far as I think a lot of the guys training at the time and trying to break it, because there were suddenly a lot of the options were gone. As a fan, it was frustrating because the lack of competition creates a sour or dull product very frequently. And as an aspiring wrestler, you know, trying to make a name in the business, you suddenly saw half your opportunity, 2/3 of that big money opportunity just go away like that. So yeah, it was a challenging time, but it was also kind of an exciting time because you also thought it was just a matter of time till the next big thing came along. Of course, I guess the next big thing would have been TNA, Ring of Honor, stuff like that. Some of these things are still around today. Some of these other projects like Wrestling Society X, which I was a part of, you know, were a bright flash and then suddenly fizzled and faded and you know, didn't come back. But it did kind of open the doors for other players to come in and say, hey, we're another big major wrestling company. And I guess really, to an extent, the only company that did that successfully was TNA. Ring of Honor still kind of struggling to prove it, and they're, you know, but that's pretty much now. If you're a wrestler, trainee, student trying to break into the business, you're looking at your options. You're looking at, okay, WWE / NXT, or TNA, or Ring of Honor, or Lucha Underground, or Japan. You know, suddenly, like, the options are a little bit wider now. It's just the progress of things, but it's definitely an interesting story. I don't know if that's kind of the input that you're looking for, but that's about the best thing I can say on that subject, I guess.
Yeah, I can totally understand, and I guess agree with. I can understand, and it fits in with a lot of what I heard about from other people who have also talked about that time. Now, speaking of the start of TNA and Ring of Honor, why not? Why don't we now jump a little bit ahead and talk about the start of PWG and also the, what was it, 4 or 5 founders for the company?
With PWG, actually, there were 6 guys who started the company, and this was 2003. The 6 who started the company were Super Dragon, Joey Ryan, Scott Loss, Disco Machine, Top Notch Higher, drawing a blank here. Disco Machine. Oh, Excalibur. How can I? Sorry, Excalibur. Anyways, those were the original 6 guys, and basically what happened is they wanted to start their own promotion because they were a little tired of just, political BS and the power that promoters yield and just unfortunate things that they wanted to try to get away from. So what happened is Joey Ryan actually contacted me. I was pretty good friends with Joey ever since he actually first debuted. He actually first started his training at the School of Hard Knocks, and he contacted me and said, hey, would I be interested in doing a show they were going to do in the summer of 2003, and it was just going to be a one-shot deal, and it was going to be kind of like a star-studded, all-star indie show, kind of basing it on the independent sort of thing, superstar thing that APW had started several years back with their King of the Indies tournament. Just a big name-filled, star-studded show without any real feuds or storylines. Just the drawing power itself would be the storyline of the show. And of course, I was in. I told them, without any reservation. Of course, I do anything they want to do. I knew all these guys already. I was probably the closest with Joey and Scott, but I knew them all. And so, of course, I wanted to be part of it. And if I remember right, the main event of that first show in July of 2003 was supposed to be Samoa Joe versus AJ Styles. And Joe had some sort of an injury. He got hurt in Japan or something. I can't remember. Some sort of an arm injury is all I really remember. And he unfortunately could not compete. And this was announced, I think, a few weeks or a while before the show, so it wasn't a surprise day of the show surprise. But I remember Joe being there at the show to talk to the fans and say sorry he couldn't be there, But Frankie Kazarian was the replacement who wrestled AJ Styles in the main event of that first show. And basically, long story short, it was such a success, and they had such a fun time doing it that it's now summer 2016, and they're still going. A lot has changed in the landscape of PWG ownership. I mean, out of those 6 original guys, I think Joey Ryan, Joey Ryan, Excalibur, and Super Dragon are the only 3 still involved. And as far as true ownership, I don't even know what the true division is. If it's just the 3 of them, I remember hearing a few years back there were rumors that Young Bucks bought some ownership into the company. I honestly do not know if any of that is true. As far as I know, in my dealings with the company, Super Dragon is basically the boss now, and I don't know if Joey has anything to do with the company at all, other than a wrestle occasionally. I don't think he's involved with ownership, booking, anything like that. And Excalibur still, of course, has a say in everything. So as far as I know, it's basically Super Dragon and Excalibur running PWG now. Of course, in deference to the Board of Governors, who they always speak about.
Now, with the talk of PWG, can you maybe elaborate a little bit on why Super Dragon has become somewhat of a legend in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla?
I guess in the late 90s, early 2000s, he was very enigmatic as it was coming up with a promotion here in Southern California called Revolution Pro. He wrestled over in Japan briefly with All Japan. He had some WCW matches. His tag team partner Blitzkrieg, in fact, got signed to WCW, went on to have a little bit of a career with them. You know, he always had a pretty unique style. The aerial combined with the shoot fighting, striking type stuff. He got a fan following. He was very much the time of Stone Cold, the anti-hero. So I mean, you know, you got cheered for flipping people off, stuff like that. So, you know, I don't know. It's hard for me to pinpoint exactly what gave him that iconic legendary status, but part of what keeps it there is his sporadic appearances. I mean, he's only wrestled, 3 or 4 times over the last several years. When he does appear, it's usually a pretty big deal and very well dramatically displayed. And, you know, I think he'd like nothing more than to wrestle on a continual basis, but he does have nagging injuries that tend to keep him out. Plus, I think maybe he does tend to prefer to do things on the business side of the company rather than on in the ring nowadays too. He's getting older just like I am, and I think to maintain the type of style that he wants to wrestle, he knows he can't go out there and be half-assed Super Dragon. So to do 100% Super Dragon, it's very taxing on his bodies, and so that doesn't surprise me that we see it very rarely, if we ever will see it again. I totally get that. I'm right there with him. But yeah, as far as why he's got that legendary status, I don't know. The fact that he never talks, he never cuts promos, you never really hear him vocalize anything. And all the years he's been wrestling, I think he's maybe said just a couple of words, you know, publicly at least, in front of the camera, in front of a microphone. You know, his style that he wrestles isn't too much different than what you see a lot of guys wrestling on the indies now, because he is kind of who a lot of these guys are basing their style on, unknowingly sometimes. It's just the way it kind of works in wrestling. But yeah, just the fact that he's kind of the mysterious figure behind the scenes and just appears when things seem to get kind of crazy, just helps cement his status as a legendary figure in the company. But yeah, I don't know. It's very hard to pinpoint. That's part of the enigma of Super Dragon, I guess. Kind of funny, you know, a short story. An old friend of mine, Anthony Hernandez, who used to take pictures of for an old magazine I used to run called Scrap Magazine. We would go to all the indie shows. He'd take, you know, pictures of all the matches for me. And outside of the wrestling environment, he would tell people who he was usually very quiet, very reserved, never put anyone over, so to speak, never said anyone's praise. But outside of the wrestling circle, he would tell people, watch this guy Super Dragon, he's badass. And I remember always thinking, wow, my friend Anthony's saying, you know, talking about Super Dragon outside of wrestling, and he won't talk about anything. Ed told me that he's doing something special. He's connecting with fans somehow, and I don't know what it is, if it was that anti-hero sort of flip you off sort of thing. But yeah, I remember thinking at that point, I guess he's definitely got something special, and he definitely does.
I totally agree. He's a very mysterious character, and there really isn't that many left.
No, exactly. Good point. Yeah.
Now, since you've been somewhat of a important piece in the PWG puzzle, maybe you can talk a little bit about the critics of PWG and how people criticize their in-ring style, that some of the matches put over.
Sure. No, I think I get what you're saying. I get it. I mean, it's not for everyone. I mean, the whole approach, you know, as a student of wrestling, you know, being someone who's come up, you know, in the industry, learning, you know, as a referee behind the scenes, seeing everything, pretty much every level, it's pretty common knowledge that if you are a Joe promoter and you're going to book a wrestling show, there is a general structure to a wrestling show. You know, you have your opening match, which is, you know, not a lot of high spots, but, you know, gets the crowd's attention and kind of gets the crowd, you know, going. You know, you protect the main event as far as what they're going to be doing in the main event, and you know, the show builds in an accorded style, basically. It's a certain set out diagram of how the show should peak and how the show should end and how the fans should leave all on a high note.
Mm-hmm.
PWG Dragon has told local guys who are going out there doing the opening match, go out there and knock them dead. Go out there and have a match of the night. Just do everything you want. Blow them out of the water. Which is totally against everything that you're taught, as a student of wrestling. So you're seeing, literally, in the first match, flying ranas, dives, crazy head scissors, pretty much every crazy spot you can think of, all within the first 10 minutes. And normally, in a normal scenario, that's going to kill a crowd. They're going to love it, they're going to blow up, they're going to pop for it, and then by the time that second, third, fourth match come around, they're seeing all the same stuff they've already done. They've kind of lost interest, it's lost its impact. For some reason, I have no explanation really other than it's just the level of talent performing it. PWG fans don't react that way. They do constantly build up. I'm not saying they don't get tired at the end of the night, because there's been some shows that have drawn on so long and there's been so much energy going on that the fans are definitely tired by the main event, and it's reflected in their reactions. But overall, who'd have thought that these kids could go out there, do some crazy ass match, do every spot they know, get a holy shit chant, PWG chant, please come back chant, all in the first match, and the crowd's still right there for all the other matches. It's pretty unique, and I get it. It's not for everyone. You can I'll talk about the recent Twitter feud between Vader and Will Ospreay. I mean, everyone saw the crazy match between Ricochet and Will at the Best of the Super Juniors, and then a lot of the old timers, specifically Vader, went on there and kind of just buried it and say it's just guys doing spots. There's no story. It's just these guys are going to kill themselves and burn themselves out. It's not wrestling. It's choreographed dancing. I've heard it all, and in some way it makes me laugh, and I kind of nod my head and tilt it and say, yeah, okay, I see their point. But to the same degree, I mean, I'll bring up the Jim Cornette thing. He recently, a few months back said, Lucha Underground matches were like Chinese acrobats, and Prince Puma was nothing more than a glorified gymnast, and he doesn't understand how fans think that this is wrestling now. Well, I'm sure the old timers like Gotch and Luthez probably thought the exact same thing when they saw a wimpy little kid hit some 300-pound guy in the back of the head with a tennis freaking racket of all things and knock the guy out. They probably were like, holy shit, there goes the business, And here, these guys are doing the same thing about what the kids are doing today. If it's working and it's selling tickets, it's a progression. It's just like movies. It's just like rock and roll. It started out as pretty primitive and basic, and now it's a lot more intricate and a lot more planned out. It's just the way it is. And as far as the people who are kind of crapping on this style are basically probably the same people who crap on WWE and just about everything else they enjoy watching. So, it is what it is. If you don't like it, if you don't think it's good wrestling, then, don't watch it. Of course, you're free to speak your displeasure about it, and I'm always open to talk about it too. I don't think people are wrong for not liking a certain type of wrestling. I love it. I love the old style of wrestling. I can watch Best of the Super Juniors, and then right after that, watch an old 1979 Madison Square Garden match that's a plotting, drawn-out mess that I enjoy watching because it's what wrestling was back then. But, you're going to tell me that a kid today who's come up watching UFC or watching Lucha Underground or Ring of Honor is going to watch an old New York match from the 70s, Bruno Sammartino versus Spiros Arion, and think it's a great match? I mean, they're going to fall asleep and turn the channel within 90 seconds probably. It's just the way wrestling is. And, the stuff that we're watching now, in 15, 20 years, Ricochet's probably going to be shitting on what the kids are doing then. It's just the way it is.
I can totally agree with that, and that's why maybe can agree or disagree with this, but yeah, it could be why I've heard PWG draw comparisons to how ECW was back in the 90s.
Yeah, I think a pretty valid point, because it's definitely got that crazy underground vibe. They're doing it the way they want to do it. They're taking the conventional wrestling promotional and basically tossing it out the window. And that's not just in the ring. I mean, that's their whole business model. big knock on PWG as well is the venue's too small to accommodate the amount of fans who try to get tickets. You know, the tickets sell out within seconds. The venue only holds, you know, standing room only of maybe 500, 600 people. They could probably get 1,000 to 2,000 in for the Battle of Los Angeles if they got the right venue, but you know, it's just not probably won't happen. But yeah, they're right where ECW was doing it the way they want to do it, and their model isn't to grow. It isn't to expand into a bigger market. It's to just keep cranking out DVDs and sell the DVDs all across the world, which is what they're doing. And they already know. I mean, there's one guy signed for Battle of Los Angeles this year, and you know, they're already getting the interest in tickets. It's still 3 months away, and people are already trying to get tickets. It's going to be pretty crazy when that hits. And you know, they did that by doing it the way they wanted to do business, not by the traditional wrestling means, which doesn't work for everyone, but for whatever reason, it's working for PWG.
I can agree with that, and the proof is the fact that they're still in business.
Yeah, no kidding. And who'd have thought? I never would have thought 13 years later we'd still be doing it, and it's nuts. I mean, most of the promotions that I have kind of had tenures with over the years were all come and go type promotions. I mean, Empire Wrestling Federation, the promotion that I started with back in the 90s, they're still around, they're still cranking. Jesse's still doing shows. I very rarely work for them. I did a benefit show for them a couple months ago for the victims of the San Bernardino shooting out here. But, you know, they're still running. PWG's still running. Championship Wrestling from Hollywood's still running. There's not a lot that can say that. WPW, which is a World Pro Wrestling, a Lucha Libre fed based out of Orange County here, they've been running since the 90s, and, you know, they've kind of been a come and go type of thing, but they're holding their 20-year anniversary this year, I believe, and they just had a big show a couple weeks ago to reflect that. So, yeah, it's pretty unique, because, I mean, I can literally probably go back and name 20 or 30 promotions that I've worked for, and out of those, there's, maybe 5 I just named that are still going. So, yeah, props to them if you can keep going. And especially 13 years, that's amazing. And doing it the way they want without really conceding anything, yeah, it's been great.
I can totally agree with that. Now I just want to make one point about or ask your opinion on something, since you brought up Will Ospreay and Vader. William Regal shed his opinion on it, and he actually had a completely different opinion than any other old-timer, because I would classify Regal as an old-timer. He basically said that, to go with what you said, that back when Dynamite Kid and Mark Rocco were stealing the show in England, the old-timers over in England were crapping on their in-ring style. There's, you know, basically he said there's always been a different style, it's just maybe not for everyone, or something to that effect.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and most of the time, I think what gets a lot of guys, especially, you know, quote-unquote old-timers, you know, they see youngsters coming in, and in that particular case that Regal's talking about, it would have been, you know, the youngsters like Dynamite and Rocco, you know, coming in there and literally, like you said, stealing the show. I mean, as an old-timer who's been doing it a certain way all these years, to see these kids come in and suddenly are beating the crap out of each other, doing these high spots, and they're like, wait, we got to go out there now after these kids and top what they're doing, you know. But in the kids' minds, they're like, you know, we got to get noticed, we want to climb the ranks. It's just like anything, you know. Not only is it maybe not just it's not a style for everyone, it's just the evolution of it. It's just the way wrestling has changed. You know, and it's you look at a match from the 40s or the 50s, look at a match from the 60s and the 70s, and so on and so forth. It's completely different. I mean, and I'm not just talking about indie spot fest matches. I mean, look at WWE/WWF. Literally take a title match from this year, look at a title match match from 20 years ago, and then look at a title match from 40 years ago. Completely different dynamic, completely different feel, completely different. You could almost argument that they're not even the same sport we're watching. It's that different. But it's, you know, it can only keep getting crazier and crazier. I mean, thankfully, I see a bit of more of a trend going. It's hard to believe, but I think I see a little bit more of an emphasis on safety now than there has been. Before it was, you know, we got to do the craziest thing to get noticed, and to some degree that's still kind of true, but I think you're getting people who are starting to maintain the stability of their bodies a little more important, and I think I'm starting to see that a little bit more, thankfully. But yeah, it's just the nature of wrestling. It's always going to be changing, and when it doesn't change, that's when we'll know that it's really gotten stale and probably will die and never come back.
Well, to further, to continue the conversation, rather, I heard, I think it was Arn Anderson say, when people are yelling, you talk. Could that apply to how wrestling is now, where, you know, you have a high spot match and then you go out and have a different match, whether it's a technical match or a storytelling match, or...
I see what you're saying, and I understand what he's saying too. Yeah, that's exactly the way of standing out. And you know what Arn was talking to was like when cutting a promo. You look at Arn Anderson promos over the years. Very rarely did his voice level get above a certain point. I mean, sure, there were times he got going and maybe he got a little loud, but his best promos were always, you know, soft spoken and very meticulous and to the point. You know, let Hulk Hogan do all the ranting and raving, let Dusty Rhodes do the jiving and all that. You know, his promos were, and they were intense, and you believed him. And same thing with Tully Blanchard. You know, when those dudes talked, it was like, you know, this stuff is real, and you know, they were cutting the chase, and they did it without screaming and yelling and ripping their shirt off.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of guys, that's, you know, how their wrestling persona was created and how they could reflect it. But the same thing could be said in the ring too. You know, if there's two different type of wrestlers backstage. There's the type who are watching what's going on out there, saying, "All right, well, we got to cut that out of our match because they just did it." And then there's the ones who are just basically planning their own match, oblivious to what's going on out there. And I think that's kind of what Arn was reflecting when he's saying that you know, hey, you see what everyone else is doing, don't do the same thing, change it up. I remember, you know, being told that on shows with Ric Flair, nobody chops. You do not do a chop. Only Ric Flair does chops, and he's here tonight, so let Ric Flair do the chops. Don't even do it. It was kind of a rule on any show he was on. And, you know, if people are aware of that, that's kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier, the structuring of a wrestling show as opposed to just going out there every match and trying to have match of the night.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, you know, for whatever reason it works for PWG, but it won't work for most other promotions, and it shouldn't work for most other promotions based on, you know, just time-tested values. But yeah, kind of interesting if you think about it, to just do something a little bit different. That's what gets your attention, and you don't need to be the loudest, you don't need to be the biggest, you just kind of need to be the most memorable. Make sure they remember you, and if you get them to remember you by being different from everyone else, then more power to you.
I couldn't agree more. Now since you brought up Wrestling Society X a little bit earlier, I figure maybe we could talk about that a little bit.
Society was awesome. I mean, you know, at the time, I think we shot the premiere, or the pilot, I should say. We did like a one-off episode. We taped it at this venue. This would have, I'm thinking, 2006, maybe late 2005. Can't quite remember. We did the one episode, and you know, several months went by before we were told that it got picked up, and yes, we're going to continue with the full season. And at the time, that was, you know, one of the best experiences of wrestling, one of the best wrestling experiences I'd ever had. It was just an amazing experience all around, not just with the the level of talent, but it was my first time really working with very, very high production values, very, very high budget. What we basically did for that first season, I can't remember how many episodes, it ended up being 12, 13, something like that. We basically shot them all the entire season, I think in a 1 week span, might have been a week, maybe it was 2, can't quite remember. But we were at a studio in Hollywood, soundstage, and we basically knocked out all those episodes in that one time frame. And it was, I mean, we were treated like stars. It was just truly amazing. The way we were catered to and the way they took care of us, and being there in downtown Hollywood, just in the mix of all that. The celebrities stopping by during it all. It was just such a fun experience. And unfortunately, as what happens in the wrestling world a lot, I guess from my understanding at the time, because MTV, Viacom is who basically was having Big Vision Entertainment create the show for them. It was a show that was pitched by Kevin Kleinrock apparently, and they picked it up and said, okay, let's do it. Kevin's original idea was basically to have all punk rock bands. It was more to be a punk thing, but they wanted more of a wider audience swath, which is understandable, which is why you got more hip-hop musical acts and stuff like that in there, kind of involved. But basically, to make a long story short, by the time the thing hit the air, ownership had basically changed, and the people who were now calling the shots, regardless of whatever other story you might hear, they basically just didn't like wrestling on their network anymore. So that's basically what killed WSX. They wanted to pull it off the air. They came up with some lame story about it was too violent. There was a spot where Vampiro fireballed Ricky Banderas, and they thought that their actual argument was that too many children were going to emulate the actions they were seeing on Wrestling Society X, like the fireballs and the thumbtacks, which was just the most insane statement I'd ever heard, because at the time their biggest rated show was Jackass, which was about a couple of guys who pushed each other down steps in shopping carts. I mean, they would take normal household objects and try to kill each other with it. They thought that was okay to put on their network, but not the highly choreographed, stunt-driven, production-produced show that we were offering, They basically just didn't like wrestling water off the air. So, basically, they, canceled it, but contractually, they were obligated to show the entire season, so I think they burned through the last few episodes in like a marathon one day, and they were done with it. Oddly enough, it kind of received a second life on some of the Spanish channels like MTV Trace and stuff like that. And I even remember hearing not too long ago it popped up on some other Spanish station. So, and then funny thing, not long after the Wrestling Society X thing ended, MTV and their great mixed up wisdom decided they wanted to do a wrestling show again. And I don't know what brought that on, but hey, if they wanted to pay, I was going to be there for it too. So we did another show called Lucha Libre USA, which we did some tapings for, and that was just plagued by all sorts of bad things. I mean, we had some great talent, some great Mexican wrestlers, some great American wrestlers. It was pretty stacked sort of thing, and I think we take maybe a dozen episodes or so, and I think sometimes those still pop up on some Spanish channels, MTV2, MTV3, stuff like that. But yeah, Lucha Libre USA was kind of cursed. We would be doing these shows in these huge venues with a couple thousand people in these 50,000 seat arenas, and it just looked horrible for TV. And yeah, I don't know, it was just, I remember doing some of the tapings, we would be there literally all day because they couldn't get, the lighting worked, or they couldn't get the cameras blocked, right? I mean, it was just a nightmare working Lucha Libre USA. I kind of blocked most of it from my memory, but Justin Borden was bringing it up to me a while back and kind of making me remember how bad some of the experiences were. But the matches themselves and some of the footage that I remember having from Lucha Libre USA was actually pretty good. Of course, they had some great wrestlers. It was more of an arena type wrestling show as opposed to what Wrestling Society X was, which in my opinion was a much more better mold for what MTV was doing. And if they'd have just got behind it and promoted it, it could have been a good thing. It could have ran. I mean, at the time, when the right people were in place at MTV promoting it, we were told this was going to be touring around the world. It was going to be seen, yada yada yada, and we were going to hit the road with it. And it was just going to go on, and of course, it didn't even last the full first season. But if they would have got behind it and supported it, it could have been good. Could have made stars out of all these guys, which to some degree we did, and they all have. A lot of those wrestlers have gone on to do great stuff now.
That's very interesting story and a very true statement about why, or about how sometimes the cable providers can kill a wrestling show.
Yeah, big time. I mean, I think people, there's the automatic comparisons between Wrestling Society X and Lucha Underground. The sets look kind of the same. The concept kind of looks the same. A lot of similarities. A lot of the same, wrestlers and stuff like that. A lot of the same people. But the big difference is kind of just what you touched on. We had a network who we were trying to sell a show to with Wrestling Society X, where on Lucha Underground we have a network making a show with us. And that's just key. That is so huge. I mean, it's a world of difference. Lucha Underground, I mean, you want something that you think you need something for a match. You need some sort of a breakaway from this or that. You need some sort of a thing. You ask them, and boom, it's there within an hour. I mean, they are 100% dedicated to supporting the product. Where Wrestling Society X, it seemed like they were taking every opportunity to try to knock you down off the ladder. Much different scenario.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're gonna switch it up a bit, and I'm gonna spitball some names to you, and you just, give me your thoughts on the person. We're gonna start off with a name not a lot of people know, but Chris DeJoseph.
DJ. I love him. I thank him for everything. He's, for those who don't know, he basically is a producer of the show, one of the head writers, if not the head writer. He's boss man. He's just a kick to be around, and this is not just this is not just butt kissing. He is legitimately a funny guy, and he has a good heart, and his interest and his heart is in the right place, and he wants to do good. He wants to create a great show. He wants to do right by everyone. And I think one of the things that's a pleasure working for him is that he's open for ideas and suggestions. Took me about a year at Lucha Underground before I'd open my mouth and say, make a suggestion or say, why don't we do this, or let's, And then when I started doing it, I was shocked to see how receptive he was, and to realize that he wanted to hear my input, wanted to hear everyone's input. So it's been nothing but a blast working for him. He's a good friend. I enjoy him. He's a great person.
Before I move forward, I just want to say to anyone who may not know Chris DeJoseph, he is the, lead writer for Lucha Underground and used to be formerly Big Dick Johnson in WWE.
Right.
Now, just another question about Chris. Does he speak highly of Vince, or...
I've never heard him speak negatively of anyone, honestly. I've never heard him bury anyone. He speaks positively of his time at WWE. He speaks positively of all the other people that he's worked with there. Triple H, Vince, everyone. I don't think I've ever heard him say anything negative about his time there.
That's good to hear. Matt and Nick Jackson.
Matt and Nick Jackson. Boy, where do I start? When we first met, I kind of thought they were another fly-by-night couple of kids just kind of learning the business, trying to get in because they were wrestling fans and self-trained for the most part. I mean, I think they give a lot of their credit to being trained by Ron Rivera of Revolution Pro out here in Southern California, but the truth of the reality is they trained themselves. These are it's the Young Bucks is who we're talking about. If nobody knows, I'm sure they do. But good kids. I mean, I'm so happy for the success that they've had, or that they're having. I mean, they're at a point in their life and career where they can kind of call the shots that they want. And that's exactly what they're doing. You know, if they wanted to go to WWE, they could go. If they didn't, you know, if they want to continue their career in Japan, they could wrestle full time there until they wanted to quit. These guys can call their own shots. And they're incredibly humble. They are as cocky and arrogant as their on-screen personas are. They're two of the legitimately most caring and good-natured guys I know. Like I said, I've known them since they started. I know their families. I know their dad. Even outside of wrestling, I'm friends with them. We basically, before they became big wrestling stars, they worked for their dad's contracting business, and I was a kitchen cabinet sales rep, and so our paths crossed a lot, you know, up in the high desert areas of California here. And so we've known each other a long time, and they're good people, and I wish them nothing but success. And on the flip side of that, I hate those guys. I can't stand the way they treat me and everyone else at PWG, and I wish that I could just kick them in the face any chance I could.
What about their brother? Have you ever worked with him?
Oh yeah, Mal's a good kid as well. He, I don't know if he's just full on retired. I mean, or what, but he had a lot of talent. He just, you know, I don't think he had quite the drive to be a wrestler that his brothers did, and I think he's just kind of doing his own thing. But he's a good kid. You know, I don't think that family's capable of cranking out a bad person, so to speak.
Now from somebody I did not know that is actually somewhat of a name out in California, but apparently is somewhat of a name, the Raging Bull Manny Fernandez.
Well, you know, I've had very little interaction with Manny Fernandez. I've only worked a couple of shows with him, and the one show was many years ago. But this is probably going back maybe 2000 to 2001. I remember Chris Daniels contacted me and said, "Hey, can you come do this show?" I was out at a baseball stadium after a minor league game, and I jumped all over it. Like, yeah, of course, Chris. You know, went down there. And the main event of the show was Chris Daniels versus Manny the Raging Bull Fernandez, and I don't know, I kind of usually tread lightly over stuff, but he was kind of a racist dick. I remember he was telling me a story about something that had happened previously, and he was just dropping N-bombs left and right, and I remember being like, wow, for a guy who, you know, was a star down in the South, you know, and I thought he would have been a little more racially tolerant, but maybe I caught him on a bad day, I don't know, but you know, that was he's sitting in the locker room with him for a good extended amount of time that day. And then I worked another show with him many years later, and he kind of barely crossed paths, and I didn't have much interaction with him. But that's really my only Manny Fernandez story. I don't really know much about him else being out here in California.
I've only seen a couple interviews with him, and he comes off as exactly what you said.
Unfortunate, because I enjoyed watching him wrestle as a kid. That's one of the things that sucks when you get involved in wrestling, or you get kind of no honesty. For the most part, everyone's been very nice all my years, and the people I've met have been very gracious and humble. But you meet a few who are that kind of like, wow, that sucked. I wish I didn't know that about him, and he was one of them.
Well, now let's move to a lighter note and back to Lucha Underground with Johnny Mundo.
Johnny Mundo, true professional. I mean, he puts so much thought and effort into everything that he does in wrestling, from his appearance to his gear to his matches. It's been a pleasure working with him. It wasn't shown on television, but he actually broke my leg this year, which is why early in season 2 I was off the TV for several weeks in a row, because I was injured. And it was just a freak in the ring accident, but I mean, he was so apologetic about it, and even though it wasn't really his fault. I mean, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He rolled back, boom, there was my leg snap, and but just the fact that he was followed up with me and was just very apologetic about it. I remember thinking, dude, it wasn't your fault yet. You're apologizing, and just a true professional in every ring, but in every sense of the word. But in the ring, he just the meticulousness, every little detail. I mean, there's no wasted movement, there's no wasted energy, or no wasted effort in everything that he does. Everything that he does in the ring is for a reason, or is to a greater cause. And, it's such an honor working with him, and a pleasure to see how he puts together matches, and then to see the way the matches come out. And yeah, it's fantastic. He's awesome. He's been one of the cornerstones of our show, and one of the reasons that this show's been as successful as it has been.
Now this might be a little bit of a reach, because I can't remember if he actually worked for Lucha Libre USA, but Marco Corleone?
Yeah, he's awesome. He was, in fact, one of the names I was actually going to name drop during Lucha Libre USA as far as the great guys that we worked with. I loved him. In fact, people don't know, he was Mark Jindrak in WWE. Another guy who I think is a great talent. I loved working with him as well. I think he deserves to be the star that he is in Mexico, and I wish he could have had a bigger run here in the United States. But yeah, he was always cool to me, and always very fun to work with. I enjoyed all my matches with him.
Now we go with another former WWE alumni and also another former WCW alumni in Sean O'Hare.
Got to work with him a little bit, and very, very, very nice guy, very friendly. He was heavily involved in the comedy scene out here, believe it or not. He was starting to do nightclub stuff with some friends of mine. There's kind of a big correlation out here in California between stand-up comedy and wrestlers. Van Damme's done it. There's kind of like a whole crossover with a lot of the guys. And he was getting involved with that. He was tremendous look, great guy. Just sad story.
I know you said you only worked with him a little bit, but did you see the potential that everyone else, a lot of other people saw?
Yeah, I thought that he had the look. He could have been Batista. If he'd have gotten the right push behind him and all that, I think he definitely could have gone far. I thought the dude had a great look. Any limitations he had in the ring could have been overcome or worked around just like any other big guy. But he was an honor to have known him the short time that I did.
Now was Chris Kanyon one of the WCW alumni that stopped by after the purchase of the company?
Yeah, I worked with Chris Kanyon a couple of times. Actually, he worked PWG once. We brought him in, I think a year or two before he passed away. And he was a big, very nice guy, very approachable. I remember being able to go up to him and ask him stuff, and he was very forthcoming, always very willing to talk and critique stuff. Which for anybody out there who's listening who's an aspiring wrestler, if you ever get the chance to work a show where someone of that caliber of nature is there and able to watch, and you're able to get anything from them, soak that stuff up. Even if you don't agree with it, remember it and think about it, because at some point you're going to understand what it was and why he said it, most likely. But it was a pretty unique experience working with him as well.
Yeah, because I don't think most people realized how long Kanyon was in WCW.
No, he was a mainstay. In fact, he was also, if you ever get an opportunity to interview Brian Cage, Kanyon was very influential on Brian Cage in his life and his career, everything. He looked up to him, and he's a big part of forming who Cage has become. you'll never hear anyone speak any higher of Canyon than Brian Cage.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. How about the Fallen Angel and Kazarian?
Chris Daniels, when I first started going to indie shows in the 90s, he was one of the first guys I saw and stood out right away. That he was definitely head and shoulders talent-wise above just about almost everyone else who I was seeing at the time. It was kind of like latch onto him and just follow his coattails because he was going to be a star. He should have been a much bigger star than he is, in my opinion. I think he should have been a big star in WCW. He got a bad break getting signed to WCW right before they went out of business and got sold, and his contract did not carry over apparently. And WWE has only used him sporadically, and in very, very small, limited roles here and there. True ring general, true master of the sport, true student of the sport in every sense. A good friend. I've probably known him longer than anyone in the wrestling business, as far as personal friends in wrestling. And I hope when the time is right for him, I think first off, it's a testament that he's still going as good and as strong as he is, as long as he has been, because most guys cannot maintain that sort of tenure at the level he's been doing it. And second, I hope when he is ready and decides to step away from in-ring competition, he gets snatched up by WWE as some sort of talent trainer, head coach, something. He needs to stay involved in wrestling, and I'm sure he will. It's kind of one of those givens. He'll either become a broadcaster or something. I mean, incredibly intelligent guy, and one of the best wrestlers in the world. As far as Frankie Kazarian, when I first started training and first started becoming a referee, he was like one of the first guys that I met. He had just come out here to California from Boston. He had been trained with Killer Kowalski out there, was moving back home out here to California, was starting to train at School of Hard Knocks, and he and his good friend Josh Galaxy were a tag team called Bad Influence, and I remember refereeing all their early matches basically, and me and Frankie became very, very close, and we were traveling companions for many years. Every weekend we traveled together. There was a small group of us, me, Frankie, Ricky Reyes, Marty Elias, the Human Tornado later. We were kind of like the group that traveled the States every weekend and wake out. And it's just great to see them, first off, that they've had great success and they're achieving the fame that they are. But secondly, that they're doing it together as a team is even better. And I think it's kind of cool. I can tell they enjoy working with each other. They're legitimately good friends. And I hope they can get a good long run out of their tag team.
Mm-hmm. Oh, just one other name popped into my head when you were talking. Adam Pearce.
Adam Pearce, another guy who is one of my closest friends in the business, and extremely proud of the success he's had behind the scenes at NXT, one of the head trainers over there, and just another guy who breathes and bleeds pro wrestling. I mean, it's into his blood. It will never leave his blood. And much like Chris Daniels, he's a perfect fit in that trainer capacity, that mentor capacity. I learned a lot working with Adam the years that I did, and we learned a lot together in the ring, outside the ring. We were attached to the hip for many years there, it seemed, from 2003 to 2007 probably. We were constantly doing everything together, and it's great to see that he's able to have an impact on this new generation of wrestlers, and he's able to do it without sacrificing his body. I mean, he's got a long history going back with injuries, and before he even became a wrestler, I mean, he basically had to learn to walk all over again from football injuries. Another guy, the fact that he's able to go and do what he did. I mean, he became a five-time NWA World Champion after all that, So I mean, good friend, and just so happy to see that he's making a living doing what he needs to be doing.
I couldn't agree more. I'm a big fan of Adam Pearce. My last question is, do you think that Jim Cornette is capable of praising anything that happens in modern wrestling?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he is. I mean, Jim Cornette, someone made a point about him the other day, how he's kind of like, he's that old relative in the room who you respect him and you love him, but sometimes you wish he could just keep his mouth to himself because he's spouting off, not knowing what he's saying or whatever. But honestly, when it comes to his wrestling mind, he's got a great one. He really does. I mean, I know he doesn't like a lot of the modern stuff going on, and that's fine. That's his opinion. But that being said, he still has a lot of great stories to tell. He has a lot of great information stacked away in that brain of his. And whenever I do come across something that Jim Cornette's talking about, I usually always stop and listen to it because I'm going to get something out of it, whether I think he's full of what or not. I'm still going to get something out of it. So, I mean, in answer to your question, yeah, of course, there's stuff that he'll praise in modern wrestling. But he wants to hear that, I want to hear what he's unhappy with because that's what's entertaining,
That's very true. Once again, not to be a broken record, but I'm a big fan of Jim Cornette as well.
I am too, despite what he said about our star.
Now, if you have any upcoming shows that you'd like to hype, or maybe social media, here's your spot.
Okay, on Facebook, I do have a fan page. You can find it just under referee Rick Knox. On Twitter, I am at MadMadRef. On Instagram, I'm at Rick Knox Referee, or excuse me, R Knox Referee, at R Knox Referee on Instagram. And as far as upcoming shows, this coming up weekend, the 25th and 26th, Loyal Heights, Los Angeles, Lucha Underground Season 3 finale tapings, both days. And let's see here. See what else we got here. In July, the 22nd and the 23rd, a doubleheader for FCW, Finest City Wrestling in San Diego, in conjunction with the San Diego Comic-Con. The week after that will be 13, the 13-year anniversary show for Pro Wrestling Guerrilla in Reseda, California. That's July 29th. In August, I've got August 20th, Pacific Coast Wrestling out of Torrance, California. So, yeah, things are thinning out. It's getting hot in the summer. Not too many guys are running. And then, of course, in September, we've got the Battle of Los Angeles, September 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, the annual tournament that PWG runs, which usually always happens around the hottest weekend of the year. So I will definitely be not looking forward to that. But it's always a blast, so can't say no.
I totally agree. To you, the viewer, thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this that you can only find right here at Wrestling Express. And to you, Mr. Knox, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. It was fun.
And I will talk to you again soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.